Ruto and Raila unite on tax. I would never thought that Ruto and Raila would unite on anything, but now they unite on tax, and that's on the top strip of the front page of the Daily Nation. I'm still in studio with Chris Omalo, MP Kiminini, and Anthony Oluoch, MP Mathare, looking at the issues behind these headlines. Last week, the kind of drama members of the National Assembly entertained us to was something out of a movie script or something we see probably in parliaments in Malaysia or elsewhere in Asia. But surely the kind of promise you had made to Kenyans that you will stand by us, you will make sure that these things do not pass. None of that came to being. We just saw something totally, completely different happening in Parliament, botched process, and we're wondering, is that how a parliamentary process is carried out on something that is so close to the hearts of Kenyans? Something to do with VAT, something to do with heavy taxation that now has become a reality. Is that how members of the National Assembly handle such a process?
Whatever happened last week, it was very, very unfortunate. I was in the House, morning session and afternoon session. But I think maybe we look at the process. Honorable Soipan Tuya, it's not her first time. This is her second term. She's a lawyer by profession. She's been handling the House very well. But on that very day, I don't know what happened. I've been reflecting. I know she's heavy, she's expecting, and maybe Mr. Speaker should not have allowed her to handle that responsibility, because I think she's almost due. At one time, I was like in my mind.
Are you saying because of her medical situation she was not able to?
No. It's not that she
carry out
when you are in some condition, even the gynecologist will tell you you are not even allowed maybe to fly, to travel. Anything can lead to maybe early delivery, because Honorable Soipan is my very good friend. And I know her EDD is almost, and particularly when such issue was coming on the floor of the House, I don't know why Speaker, just a minute, let me finish.
Is it fair?
No, let me finish. Let me justify. You see now, if you cut me short, let me justify. You know, in pregnancy, I don't know whether you've had a wife. Maybe you're saying this because you've never had a wife.
I am married.
You are married and your wife has delivered?
Yes.
Yes.
More than
when
once.
your wife is, there's first trimester, second trimester, and the third trimester. In the third trimester, that is the time they're allowed to go leave for maternity. That's a very delicate balance. That is the time you need to relax. Your mind ABCD. So as far as I'm concerned,
she was not in a position.
She was almost, I think she's the third trimester from my experience, because I'm an experienced father and I know. And when you reach that third trimester, that is part you need delicate care. You don't need to handle a task which is very difficult. And that particular time I was in the House, and before you vote, you must ascertain, because anything contrary to the presidential memoranda, you must have a two-thirds majority. And before any division, as a speaker or the person on the floor, you must ascertain that there's a two-thirds before you allow the voting. So the assumption is, when Honorable Soipan allowed voting, because normally what happens, she has some clerks and there's some technical people, they are told, please, can you ascertain what are the numbers? Before she allowed the voting, the assumption of the members of parliament is she must have ascertained that we have a two-thirds majority. And she knows the standing orders. As a lawyer, and she's doing that speaker's panel for the second time. It's not that she's doing it for the first time. So she knows very well. So the assumption with the members of parliament was that here, yes, we have the two-thirds. And maybe that's why there's the leader of majority. And I think we need to look at our standing orders, because to me it might be something like cross misconduct. When he started whipping the Jubilee MPs, that please get out. Some even going to hide themselves in the toilets, so that to deny the two-thirds majority. So majority leader tried to do that, But the speaker, the chair who was on the floor at that time, Honorable Soipan, allowed the voting to go on. So the assumption was, and by the way, at that time, we had many members of parliament who were in the house. So the issue of talking about Wanjiku, I want to assure you, members of parliament, I've never seen the passion, the compassion like on that day. Even the members of parliament, we thought, what Jubilee says, they were just stamping, rubber stamping. I was surprised. They came out, they spoke. Kadhoni wa Mushomba from Kiambu, the lady Kadesa from, I think, Masabit or where. I could not believe it. So the members of parliament were committed and they were there to fight for the Wanjiku. But unfortunately, the process was in a mess. Up to now, and I was very shocked when His Excellency the President, the speed at which he moved to assent to that bill. To me, I thought he should not have moved that very fast. Particularly looking at the acrimony, the fights that were there, he should have reflected and seen that, is it morally good for me to sign? He signed immediately.
Yes.
Up to now, I still have a lot of questions.
But it's the manner in which these things were passed, the kinds of scene we saw in Parliament, because these things are very dear, they're very close to the hearts of Kenyans. This is something everyone was watching. MPs had given a promise, an assurance that we will stand by you. Then we just see a botched process, something out of a mediocre drama script, and then after that it becomes law. Surely, is that how Parliament should be working?
Well, the situation that happened in Parliament, I think it was unfortunate. I think what concerns me, we should perhaps go to the heart of the matter, and I think I raised this. I was, like I indicated earlier off camera, I was away in Amsterdam, and I did raise a very lengthy 5-page question to the Speaker, to which I asked that he gives direction. Because had that issue been handled properly, then we'll probably be guided on what is the extent and the context of how you apply the presidential power to express reservation. I have a problem with that in spite of the ruling. The President is not a member of the legislature. We have a clear situation of separation of power where like Alexander Hamilton once said sometimes back, that the executive's role is that they wield the sword and they dispense honors. The judiciary deals with justice and interprets the law. But it is the parliament that makes the law and it holds the purse strings. So in terms of legislative making, when the president descends to the arena of lawmaking, can we elevate him to the level where if, on our own, and I think Mheshimiwa Amalo will correct me, except for constitutional questions, we pass things on simple majority, isn't it? And if this law, and it was a finance bill or whatever appropriation bill, ordinarily a simple majority would pass it. Why would the president, who is not a member of the legislature, come and because we cannot raise a 2/3 majority, his reservation becomes law? That cannot be. And I raised comparative jurisdiction situations where we had a case in the United States, and the courts there ruled that the president then, who was President Clinton, tried to veto some law that was passed by the houses. And they said that this habit of line veto amendment, where the president comes and says, I don't like this, I don't agree with this, go back and change it. If you cannot raise the 2/3 majority, it becomes law, then you're not the lawmaker. The lawmaker then becomes the president. And especially on an issue that was so emotive as the tax issue, as this one. I think we need to revisit, we need to reconsider whether to amend that provision of the Constitution and say, look, you are the president, you are commanding over 2/3, almost 2/3 of the House. Why do you need that veto power that makes you override the lawmaking?
If I get you right, you're saying that probably if the president expresses his reservations and send that memorandum back to Parliament, then the onus should be upon him to ensure that he gets the 2/3 majority to pass that.
That is my point exactly.
Instead of the burden being on parliamentarians.
It should be the flip way. In Parliament, we make law by persuading each other. We argue, we disagree, eventually the majority win. It is the duty of the president to come and say, I am of this persuasion, and try and make a majority, which he has already in parliament, to look at things his way. But in addition to that, I think it is improper that to give him that two-thirds overriding power, so that he doesn't need to persuade you. He just needs to throw things to you and then say, you deal with it.
Yes.
I think this is a very critical matter. Article 115 of the Constitution, talking about the issue of presidential referral. And I'm happy that Honorable Oluoch has really brought it out. I think it's the highest time we should have a statute. We should have an act of parliament that tries to operationalize that Article 115, because to me, it is being abused by His Excellency the President. When you look at many other jurisdictions, presidential refusal, in this case, is normally on matters which are insignificant. And we know under Article 94 of the Constitution of this country, the only body that has legislative authority is Parliament. It's not the executive at all. But the President has done this several times by sneaking his legislations through the back door. And this should not be allowed. I think it's the highest time as members of Parliament, we either amend or we come up with a law that is going to operationalize Article 115. From the ruling of the Speaker, I think he borrowed so heavily from the 11th Parliament. And in the 11th Parliament, in the 10th Parliament, it was under a parliamentary system. We are now in the presidential system. And in the presidential system, we have the checks and balances between the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. The role of Parliament is to enact laws. The role of executive is there to implement the laws. And judiciary here comes in on matters of interpretation. So to me, and this is the highest time, because if you look at some of the recommendations that were done by His Excellency the President, they were contrary to the Constitution.
And for example, not the same that you have
absolutely. For example, the issue of taking the 9 billion from the county government, it violates Article 219 of the Constitution, which says that any money that has been divided to go to the county government should be released without delay and without any deduction. And the moment you do that, it forces you to amend the Division of Revenue Bill and also the county government, the appropriation bill. So what the President did, and I expected the Speaker to have advised this, because this is something that he has violated the Constitution, he has taken advantage for so long, and he should stop. Because the President, look, people are fighting in the plenary, and you wake up quickly. You ascend and you take off. You take a flight, you take off, you go to the UN. We are really looking at this matter. This is a very serious matter, and I think what we should be able to do as a House, and I'm happy the Senate, that time we could not be allowed to speak. I was surprised. Speaker could not allow even me to speak. I'm told somebody went and gave the names that anybody who has a different opinion should not speak. I was denied. I protested. I could not say anything. But my issue was about the issue of the county government. The money that has been divided. We passed the Division of Revenue. How do you come again and you pick the 9 billion from the county government and you say that this is within the 115?
Gentlemen, you're both members of this National Assembly. Are you saying now you still have hope? With a kind of leeway, with a kind of hand that the President has, he is aware of his strengths over Parliament right now, that whatever law you pass and take it to him, if he doesn't like it, he can simply bring it back, as express his reservations. And of course, the onus is on you to raise the 2/3 majority, which you rarely can. So definitely whatever he says becomes law. He already knows that. Do you still have hope that the National Assembly can do anything for this country?
I don't know if you can say that 2/3 was not raised. I think from the proceedings of Parliament, it appears, and you've seen this joke now too much on social media. Somebody says how many in favor, 3-4 people say aye, and then how many not in favor, there's allowed, and then all of a sudden you say the ayes have it. So really, if you go through that procedure, and I hope at some point, and the matter is now in court, and I suppose perhaps Omutata will be trying to show the courts.
Because surprisingly, Okiya Omtata is now Kenya's savior. The National Assembly is not able to do anything.
But credit to give credit to Parliament. Remember, we've been to this Parliament, these forums before, where you people asked us that, look, you guys slept on the job from 2013 to 2016, 2016 to now. And people were saying parliamentarians did nothing. Then they said, we did something. We gave a 2-year window. The president went and reversed it. Then, what did Parliament do? You saw something that has never happened in the life of this Parliament, and perhaps not even the security law. I think it was one side of the divide against the other. It was very evenly divided. On this particular one, there was an overwhelming show of solidarity with a common man.
Across political divide.
Of course, there was justification, and the president has his reasons he wants to raise taxes. There is a position of the party, and I suppose that there is a place for the question that when a party has taken a position, the members ought to try and take that position. That's what happens in advanced democracies. But these were very unique circumstances, we must all admit. And I must give a big thumbs up to members of Parliament. So if you're asking, is there hope? I think there is. There are two things that could happen. Mheshimiwa Malo has alluded to it. We need to deal with the elephant in the house, and for me that is Article 115. We simply must remove that power from the president. Let the president persuade us. Let him come to, if he must descend to the legislative arena, he must do so by persuasion and to marshal, not to overrun and to load it over people. The elephant in the house is Article 115. I think secondly, there is a matter that is going to court. It is possible that the courts will find the process entirely unprocedural in the manner in which it happened. Secondly, there is the possibility that after 6 months, of course Kenyans will have suffered, we could revisit. We could revisit and completely do away with that tax. Completely do away with that tax and tell the government, please look for this money in other places. There is lot of wastage, and there was no shortage of idea on where the government could go in terms of this.
Yeah. You spoke about writing a 5-page question.
Yes.
And this question was to the Speaker.
Yes.
Don't you think that this matter should now be taken to the courts of law to actually make an interpretation? Because a question to the Speaker, really, what kind of answer do we expect from him?
I can tell you that there is a matter that is pending, and you know, he did say that the president has done this too many times. Before I became a legislator, there was a case that was filed in court, and it's still pending. It's coming up for full hearing before a 3-judge bench. There are close to about 9 pieces of legislation. There is the Audit Act, there was the Kicker Act, there is the retirement of the Vice President and Prime Minister. There is close to about 9 pieces of legislation that I know of where the president made his footprint or thumbprint into that law, and it became law by presidential fiat, what I call presidential fiat, because instead of persuading people or raising the majority himself, the majority has been passed on to the president. And I've argued that the president is not a legislature. If he's going to descend to the arena of legislation making, he must use persuasion and marshal a majority himself to support him.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I think what Honorable Oluoch raised was something very fundamental, and something similar had been raised in the other parliament by the then Member of Parliament for Arieda, Engineer Ngumbo. And I remember very well the Speaker's ruling. And on this issue of the executive, particularly the president legislating through the back door, it is something which has been an issue. Because like when you look at other jurisdictions, the president must have that goodwill, you know. And the president, in most cases, rejects on some insignificant issues. But in this case, the president has been deliberately pushing his unpopular amendments using the advantage of Article 115. And from the goodwill, we know under Article 118, legislation must go through the public participation. All the presidential recommendations, they do not go through the public participation.
It's simply the way the president wants it. He already has a majority handed to him.
Absolutely. For instance, look at the National Housing Development Fund. A poor voter, Kenyan, in Homa Bay or in Kiminini, you are told you contribute 1.5% of your salary, and the employer also, you are forced 1.5% of your salary without involving that person in public participation, without involving FKE, without involving KOTU, to hear, why am I going to be this 1.5? They had rejected it. And the president deliberately comes and dictates that you must contribute this to the National Housing Development Fund, which there's no statute existing establishing these funds. There's room for corruption.
This is a worrying bit, dear viewers, because members of the National Assembly is simply saying that the president right now can have his way with Parliament whenever he feels like.
Absolutely.
That whatever you say, he can actually change things and send it back as a reservation, as a memorandum, and because by law, the majority by default has been handed to him.
And to make it worse, Fred, we are told some members were sent on some trips, and also what the majority leader did for purposes of denying Parliament a 2/3 majority. Where is the moral integrity in this?
Wow. Let's wrap up our discussion this morning looking at the headlines, but connected to that, ODM is going to discuss the conduct of rebel MPs today. You've just talked about how members of Parliament should stick to what the party has said. That did not really come out that day. So there are members who openly defied their parties, even in Jubilee. And as you make your final comments, comment on that. Do you think this is right, what ODM is doing, that it could discuss the conduct of members who felt a certain way and decided to stick to that?
First of all, let me say that parties and democracies all over the world, they have the opportunity and the justification to apply the whip. They apply the whip on things that are party ideology issues and issues of common interest to them. And in this particular case, I think the two parties applied the whip. How the members conducted themselves in Parliament, I think, ended up being a matter more of conscience. I think the people and members of Parliament decided that on this particular one, let us or allow us to dissent or agree to disagree. And I want to plead that sanity should be allowed to prevail. I have seen on page 4 that the ODM party is going to try and summon these people. And I think we need to have a more introspection and discussion, internal discussion about this, rather than trying to discipline people on this particular issue. There is always an exception to the rule. And I think the people who set out to stand with Wanjiku, I doubt that they were openly being defiant. I think they listened. I personally spoke to my party leader, and I sympathized with the position and the party was holding. And I want to say that maybe the best thing on this one is to say that it was being caught between the rock and a hard place. Okay. So I would counsel that the party should try and retract and not try to discipline people on this one.
Because even party chairman John Buddy is now on a collision course with the Secretary General Edwin Sifuna, who felt different about that matter.
This is a very delicate matter. It's an extraordinary matter that needs some extraordinary measures. When you look at the philosophical orientations of the political parties, both ODM and the PNU, they are social democrats, you know. In social democrats, you are there for the welfare of the Wanjiku, as my colleague has clearly put it. I think what the critical thing here is to discuss and see the justification. Why? I don't want to say it's a disciplinary measure, no. I think it's something that you want lessons learned, you know. It was the way forward. Because even our leaders, wherever they are themselves, I attended the PG. The PG was for NASA. And the PG for NASA, it was held in Orange House. And I went there as a member of the party of Ford Kenya. We had our colleagues from Wiper, ANC, they were there. And we had our reservations. And Prime Minister Raila Odinga allowed us actually to air out. So it was a discussion. We had a discussion. And from his body language, I could see he was really listening. And he was, as a caring person, he was looking at how do we balance this delicate issue. And that's why there was in that press conference, there was a conditionality. And that conditionality, and if you listen keenly what he said, that if these measures are going to be done within a year, we want to do amendments ABCD. So you can tell, even from where he sits, actually, he was with the common Mwananchi. And when parliamentarians went to the floor of the House, of course the legislative power is with the members of parliament. And when they were there and there were outcries all over, the cost of living has been very high in this country. We spoke about the issue of excessive borrowing that we cannot sustain. This is what is happening. That's why we are being forced to pay ABCD. So to me, the respective party leaders, wherever they are, this is a matter that let members of parliament discuss about it, look at the justifications. And this is a delicate balance, that we must be able to get a delicate balance and to see the way forward. Because we are social democrats and we are here for the welfare of the Wanjiku.
Okay. Yes, allow members of the National Assembly some level of independence. And that's where we wrap up our news review this morning. Thank you so much, Chris Omalo, MP Kimenini, and Oluoch, MP Mathare constituency, helping us look at the issues behind the headlines. Of course, the big headline has to do with Okoth Obado being behind bars as that trial, murder trial, continues today. The governor of Migori will be back in court today for a bail hearing. And, of course, we'll be bringing you that story as soon as we get it.